Oh. Vakratunda Mahakaya Suryakoti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kuru Me Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvada Saraswati Namastubhyam Varade Kamarupini Vidyarambham Karishyami Siddhir Bhavatu Me Sada Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnuhu Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha Gurudeva Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Hariom and greetings from Niagara Falls. The IPCC, I'm sure you've heard of this term many times, stands for Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. These are the best people in the world on the subject of climate change, and they have reconciled 34,000 studies on climate change. Not a small group of scientists and not a small group of studies. In their most recent sharing, and they keep on sharing, and society keeps on ignoring, they shared that 3.5 billion, with a B, humans are highly vulnerable because of climate change. Can you imagine being vulnerable in an ordinary sense? Now highly vulnerable, and now having no control over that. It's the weather. More than 4 billion humans experience a water shortage every year. Can you imagine when you're thirsty and you just can't access water? Now having that on a regular basis. And the end of the report shares, without action, the worst is coming. If we do not act to reduce climate change, the worst is coming. Isn't this already the worst? Being vulnerable, being thirsty, but the worst is coming. These traumatic experiences are new. I just reflect on some decades ago when I became conscious of myself. I never came across this term climate change as much as I now do. These experiences are traumatic, and we will naturally think that it's because of an increase in population. And undoubtedly, that is a component of it. But I feel more so, the population that does survive is engaged in short-term thinking. All of our decisions are for this year, for 10 years, for our generation, but not beyond that. You know what that's called in Sanskrit? Kali Yuga. Kali means fast. And another way to interpret this is short-term thinking, living impulsively, reactively. And this shows the necessity for Shastra. Our relationship with our environment is not functional. It is fundamental. So we should be ready for Shasana. Shasana means guidance, instruction, precedent on how to live with our environment so that it's not traumatic. We are not traumatizing the environment. If we do feel our relationship with our environment is functional and not fundamental, then what we are to our environment is a Shastra. I'm playing on the word Shastra to Shastra. Shastra means a weapon. We are using a weapon against our environment. What is that weapon? We are. These equipments, our lifestyle. The workshop we're engaged in, thinking about this has been one of my most favorite workshops. Yesterday, when I spoke to all of you, I was running on fumes. Is that the saying where you have no more energy and you're just whatever's left there? It's been very demanding days of late. And I wasn't happy with the flow of yesterday's workshop, but I re-listened to it. And I was happy because the importance of this subject was communicated. And as I'm thinking about today and tomorrow, all of us should have these workshops regularly, with or without me. You should facilitate this in your own way, in your schools and workplaces and so on. I remember growing up studying Indigenous culture, and one practice stood out so clearly for me. I still remember it. In Indigenous culture, they never cut a tree before planting 10. They planted 10, then cut 1. Just think about how backwards our practices are now. Our Shastra. We first referenced our Shastra from the perspective of jnana, knowledge, and so we use the Upanishad. For some of you, the word Upanishad is foreign. Upanishad means upa, near. Ni, nishchayena. That means with determination. And sad, which means to destroy. When you are near the one who's guiding you, and you are determined to destroy our wrong notions. In this context, our wrong relationship with our environment. So the Upanishad is very practical for what we need to do. The first Upanishad that we used, Chandogya Upanishad. This is 6:3:1. Tesham kalvesham bhutana trinyeva bijani bhavantyandajam jivajam udbhijam iti. What the rishis teach in this verse. Infinity is life, and life is infinity. The nature of infinity is life. Now that may be abstract, so more details are added. The nature of life is existence, awareness, joy. And focusing on the infinite part, I shared with all of you yesterday, none has ever experienced their non-existence. That indicates infinitude. The same applies for awareness. The joy teaching is harder to comprehend because we rarely experience joy. So how is it that joy is infinite? Joy, which is described as ananda, is sometimes also described as ananta. Ananta means that which doesn't change. Our pursuit of joy never changes. Correct? When you're 2 or 22 or 102, the pursuit of joy will not change. So are you feeling that infinity is of the nature of life, which is of the nature of existence, awareness, joy? And life expresses, like a cause effect, as living. In this verse particularly, living is facilitated by being born from a seed or an egg or a body. A seed, an egg, or a body. We are all born from a body. We depend on that which is born from an egg, and that depends on what's born from a seed. Remember, I talked about bees pollinating plants, which we eat. The message from this verse, what we need to do with our lifestyle to make it sadachara, in harmony with our environment. Whatever we depend on, we should be supporting. Depending, that's what we get. What we have to give back is supporting. You'll find many products like coffee beans are now procured from sustainable farms. You've seen those labels before. In my reading up on bees, I was very sad to know that there's many bees in Ontario, the province I live in right now, that are endangered. Bees are used so much in our Shastra, and they're endangered. An even more specific practice for us. Less chemicals. If you forget everything from this verse, please do not forget less chemicals. Chemicals kill seeds and eggs and bodies. So in terms of the hygiene products, cleaning products, anything that we use, let us try to make this less chemical based. Are we in sync with that? Good. We then used another reference from Mundaka Upanishad 2:17. Many of you are in the Upanishad course. We use this verse in our studies. Tasmacha deva bahuda samprasutaha sadhya manushyaha pashavo vayamsi prana panau vrihiyavau tapascha shraddha satyam brahmacharyam vidischa. Sanatana Dharma is a monotheistic polytheism, which means oneness expresses as manyness. Like you are one human, but you could be a daughter, a niece, a sister, etc. So the connection between these two verses, in this verse, the rishis are teaching that life expresses as living in the form of various beings. Some of them are semi-gods, humans, birds. And this life, which expresses as living, also expresses in a less name and form way as air and fire and water and earth. Now, zooming in on this, how this applies to us. The first verse, humans depend on that which is micro. seeds and eggs, correct? Plants and bees. Humans also depend on that which is macro: air, fire, water, earth. That's the connection between these verses. And our rishis have given a beautiful framework for us to always remember this, called the Pancha Mahayagna. I'll be speaking about this next month. But in a simplistic sense, we are taught that we are born with 5 debts. The first debt is to nature's forces. The second debt is to nature's beings. All of that is shared in this verse. We have these debts. If we have a debt, that means we've taken from them, and we have to give back. The final part of this verse lists 4 beautiful virtues: Shraddha, Satya, Brahmacharya, and Vidhi. Summarizing this, how do we practice living more in harmony? In Bhagavad Gita's chapter 8, Bhagavan Krishna says you can either follow the path of the moon or the path of the sun. The path of the moon is valuables. The path of the sun is values. This is very beautiful poetry. The moon doesn't have its own light, correct? It reflects the sun's lights. If you live a life of valuables, you will always chase joy, but not be joy. But if you follow the path of the sun, you will be joy. So brahmacharya specifically was to live based on what you need. Vidhi, live for values. I'm trying to build a practice framework here. Our first practice, less chemicals. The practice from this verse, less habitat. Less habitat. That's just a sutra. It's an aphorism. What this should play out like. Do less for your living space. Especially if you're older. How many more years are you going to live in that space? I mean that politely, but productively. For those who are older, Vivek is going to have to endure climate change more than you, correct? Just by odds, I'm going to live longer compared to those who are older. The more you do for your habitat, the more that's going to take the habitat away from seeds and eggs. If you remember what I shared last month, anything you do to your habitat, at least 10% of that should be given to our habitat. Because your habitat depends on our habitat, not the other way around. Shasana, discipline, is the only way we will be able to live in harmony, not annotating. I've earned this money, I'm retired, you can't tell me what to do. That's how the majority of the world is living anyways. We should have that right sensitivity to focus on our habitat rather than my habitat. We continue, shifting from jnana to bhakti. What does our Shastras share about our environment from the perspective of bhakti? My original thought flow was to use Bhagavad Gita because it is the best commentary on the Upanishad, but I'm switching it to Bhagavata. And this will become more clear, not in the first verse, but the second one. The first verse I'm referencing is from the 10th section, the 22nd chapter, the 33rd verse. 10, 22, 33. Those in Vedanta and Bhagavata, I openly shared how important this is. This is Bhagavan Krishna speaking to his friends. Aho esham varam janma Sarva pranyupajivanam sujanasyeva yesham vai vimukhayanti narthinaha. Aho. I love these dramatic Sanskrit words like bho, aho. Aho means indeed. Esham varam janma. All these have the best birth. When this is chapter 22, which means Sri Krishna is still a child. Who do you think he's referring to when he says all of these have the best birth? Take a guess. Lots of you are in this course. Yes, he's referring to the trees of the jungle. And what an awesome insult. He's not telling his friends they have the best birth. He's saying the trees have the best birth. Sarva prani upajivanam. They help all beings survive. Don't trees do that? If we just think about it food-wise, they do. Sujanasye yeva yeshamve. Trees live like this just like noble people do. How so? Vimukha yanti nartinaha. When someone comes to a noble person with a want, that noble person never leaves them dissatisfied. A tree is the same way. Everyone's tuned into the reference. Okay, let me add more. First of all, this chapter is in English entitled The Stealing of the Gopis' Clothes. This chapter is where Bhagavan Krishna starts to test and train the gopis. And what I'm reading to you is the end part of this chapter. Why? Why all of a sudden would Bhagavan Krishna shift from testing and training the gopis to talking about this in reference to the trees? Clearly, there's an importance to this. In an earlier verse, Bhagavan Krishna tells his friends, these trees are like an umbrella against the weather, and they are Mahabhagan. They are the most fortunate. And if you remember in that class, Bhagavan Brahma shares with the gopis, I believe, that in my next birth, I would like to be born as a tree in Vrajabhumi. Because then Bhagavan Krishna will play with me. In this case, Bhagavan Krishna will describe me. Bhakti, you're all sitting, we are jnanis. Go back to the Upanishad. Let me share more contemporary thoughts to this. I was listening to a podcast about mental health and how climate change is causing significant mental health matters in all demographics. Why? It's so obvious. People are afraid of the security of their future. If you know someone in the hospital, that's causing you stress because you're afraid of the security of their them being alive. If you're having a problem in your workplace, you have stress because you're afraid of the security of your financial position. Now, this is not just my life, it's everyone's life. If Vivek dies, fine, but what about my children? They are not trained in understanding what death is like you and I are. So that causes stress. And continuing with listening, sometimes when I'm very sleepy, I did do a long drive recently, I put the radio on scan. For some, that's annoying, but when you're sleepy, it's entertaining. Guess who came on? John Tesh. Do you all know who John Tesh is? You don't? Okay. No, just ignore what I'm saying, sort of. John Tesh is known for intelligence for your life. In between songs, he'll give upadesha. He's like a rishi telling you tattvamasi. So it's so amazing. This was on Sunday. It was before our day one of our workshop. And what he was sharing was how trees are icons for, and try to note these three emotions. Trees are icons for resilience, gratitude, and awe, AWE. First of all, your mind should be blown that I'm randomly listening to this station that's talking about trees and our workshop begins in an hour and a half. That's amazing to me. He goes on to share that resilience. Trees have to endure so much heat and rain and insects, but just look at how big some of the trees are near your homes. I've seen the trees near your homes. And generosity. We are always told trees never consume their own fruits. Their root system helps so many. And awe. When you look at a tree, tell me what you feel. Share in the chat when you see a tree live with your eyes, not a video like we are just watching. What do you feel? You just want to hug them. And we want to cut them and build a bigger house. You don't think that, correct? You feel calm and peaceful and so on. Exactly. That awe reduces stress. And I remember back in the day reading an article about how hospital rooms where a patient can see nature, a park specifically, they recover faster. But if I'm in a hospital room and I see other hospital rooms or offices, I want to stay here. I don't want to leave here then, correct? Trees do that for us. And Bhagavan Krishna already knew this, how he specifically mentions this in this chapter. Zooming in on what we're supposed to do about this, in this section, there's a period where Bhagavan Krishna's family and friends are all engaged in a yajna towards Indra. Indra means a semi-god. And Bhagavan Krishna guides them that what they should be worshipping is Govardhana. Not a semi-god, they should be worshipping nature. Lovely, no? Here is Vivek's practice. Maybe this practice will develop more. Less chemicals, less habitat. For this verse, more plants. More plants. That's the practice. Plant more plants, nurture more plants, see more plants, smell more plants, wear more plants, eat more plants. All more plants, okay? And now, why I wanted to shift from Bhagavad Gita to Bhagavatam. We're going back in Bhagavatam to the 8th skanda. This is the 7th chapter, the 42nd verse. Does anyone want to tell me what happens? What is a famous katha that happens in the 8th skanda? It is the churning of the Milky Ocean. I'm reading to you. This is Rishi Shuka speaking to Raja Parikshita, but more so, this is Bhagavan Shiva after he's interacted with Bhagavati Parvati. Here. Tata karatali kritya vyapi halahalam visham abhyakshan mahadevaha kripaya bhuta bhavanaha. Tataha, after he got permission from Bhagavati Parvati. Karatali kritya, he gathered in his hands. What did he gather? Vyapi, that which is spreading everywhere. Hala halam visham, the poison that is known as halahala. Earlier on, it's called kalakuta, which means a mass of blackness. This is known to be the most poisonous substance in creation, next to the ego. Ego, then this. Abhyakshan. And what did he do? He drank it. And he is Mahadevaha. So he neither swallowed it nor spit it out. It stayed in his neck. And Mahadeva is completely white. But that poison caused his neck to become blue. So known as Nila Kanda. But why did he do this? Kripaya. Compassion. For who? Bhuta Bhavanaha, for all beings. This is our Bhagwan Shiva. Sharing some more context before I get into our more focused message. When we reflect on the Kshira Sagara Mantana, this is happening in water, correct? You can call it milk if you want, but more generally, it's water, yes? What is the churning rod for this water? Earth, no? Water and earth. Who is on top of this mountain? An eagle. Who is on the bottom of this mountain? A turtle. Who is in the middle of this mountain? A snake. Do you see any elements that are not natural here? Everything that I just described to you is natural, other than the asuras and the suras who are competing with each other. See how history repeats itself? That's us. Comparing, competing, and that's why I referenced ego. Ego is more poisonous than halahala. Some science for everyone. 50% of fossil fuel emissions, specifically the CO2 that is released, is absorbed by the ocean. And now what's happening? The oceans are absorbing too much, so they're becoming acidic. They're dying. If your body becomes too acidic, you will die. 30% of this same release is absorbed by soil. Huge amounts are absorbed in Canada, in Russia, and it's in this semi-frozen state. But when it unfreezes, what's going to happen? All of that's going to be released into the air. These are called carbon sinks. A sink like you have in your kitchen. But what happens when there's too much stuff in your sink? It starts to overflow, right? And it just starts spreading and spreading and spreading. I told all of you, as I'm looking at you, I'm looking at an overflowing sink. That's why I started to not teach in this area. Too much stress. But I worked hard to tidy up today, so it's less stressful. Our Shastra and our environment is for our achara, that is our lifestyles, to be oriented towards Sat. That is infinity, life. Sometimes that's too challenging, so I'm going to change this to achara towards Sattva. Sattva achara, let our lifestyles be more quiet, quietness. What are some characteristics of this? And I shared this in class last week. Those who are sattvic, they engage in simple living, high thinking. This is our practice, okay? Simple living, high thinking. Here's another gauge. They work hard and they work smart. And here's one more gauge, the one I want to focus on. They're long-term thinkers. Your lifestyle should be decided upon by the parameters of is this long-term? whatever choices you make sure they're made with a 10-year time frame, not 1 year or 1 month. That's Kali. And so we're completely clear, adding this to our framework, more natural. Less chemicals, less habitat, more plants, more natural. Whatever you're bringing into your life, whatever you're doing with your life, let it be more natural, even if that means you have less stuff. Remember I said simple living. Work hard, work smart, even if that makes you uncomfortable, like wearing more layers instead of heating a whole space. That's what a sattvic person would try to do. Even when you travel, specifically on a plane, you can pay more for your carbon footprint to be absorbed, correct? That's long-term thinking. I will work harder to make more money to help my environment more. Sattvachara. Okay? So these are our 4 practices thus far. Tomorrow, from jnana to bhakti to karma, we'll drift into 2 awesome shlokas from Bhagavad Gita. Continuing from discourse to dialogue, we're going to reorder our time together. Yesterday, you had questions, and the answers to those questions were, do your best and leave the rest. Even if you feel the environment is in a fatalistic position, do your best. Another question was about, how do you declutter your altar, make it clean, simple, inspiring? This will help you to be closer to what you're worshiping. And then another question was, what is the Vedic way of living? It is a lifestyle of equality. What does Vedanta teach? Oneness. So what would my lifestyle be? Of equality. Does anyone have any questions from what I shared today? From the review, Bhagavatam, some of the scientific stats that I shared? Soumya, ask away.
Hi, Vivekji. So my question is kind of along the lines of, how can I explain this perspective that we're developing right now in our workshop to someone who is not familiar with Vedanta?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Firstly, that's you presuming that you are familiar with Vedanta. So I will let you have that presumption. Secondly is, how I've been sharing with all of you, I went very purely from our scripture. I read to you the verse, the translation, and then I kept on making it, I think, more relatable, bringing it to podcasts, news reports, and so on. So instead of sharing the scripture and the verse, just focus on the science. I didn't make this up. This, you can Google all of this and you will find the same. How can you argue against that? And if you are going to argue against that, then don't say anything. What are you going to say to such a personality? If they won't listen to the IPCC, they're definitely not going to listen to you. Makes sense. And so what I'm trying to share with all of us, all of you are, here's good, here's great. We're all in between. We're good, great. What did they call that? We're middle upper income. But now this workshop is for us to be great. And I most definitely don't mean in terms of your car or your appearance. I mean in terms of harmony with our environment. We can all do better. Yes? We can all be better. That's what the focus of this workshop is. And if you are living in such a great way, yad yadacharati sheshtaha tattadevetaro janaha. What a Shrestha does, what the great do, Janaha does. Others follow. They may not come up to greatness, but maybe they'll go from ordinariness to goodness. Imagine 1 billion people did that. We can cool this earth down. It's possible. Fair? Any other questions? Okay, last question. Deepaji, go. Go as in unmute yourself, not, okay.
Sorry, Vivek. Following the path of moon is like seeking valuables. Then why is our calendar based on lunar, like the moon? Thank you.
Sure. Why do we follow a lunar calendar? To Deepa's point, if you don't know that, we do follow a lunar calendar. And so we're not in the year 2022. We're way ahead of that because there's less days in a lunar calendar. One of the reasons is to teach us about change. There's more change in a lunar calendar than a solar calendar. That time is always changing, and this makes it more apparent. So to use time better. Another, and I'm focusing less on the cultural aspects of it, more of the mental ones. The moon is symbolic for the mind. And someone had told me this. I don't know if this is rude or not, but on full moons, hospitals tend to see more patients. So that's why there's that term lunatic. Luna referring to moon. I don't know anything about the science of all of that, but our mind and our moon are greatly intertwined. So the idea with the lunar calendar is the phases of the moon keep changing like the mind does, but what's behind the mind? Awareness. What's behind the moon? The sun. So the symbolism of a lunar calendar. Okay. Your reflection adventure of the day from yesterday, and please stay with us because we still have to have our birthday celebration. That's going to be our dynamics, okay? Was for you to have a dialogue with your mother, sharing whether you're her friend or you're her foe. Does anyone want to share? Are you friend or foe? Net gain or net loss for your mother? Any honest observations and reflections? What is the best gift that a child can give a parent? What's the best gift a child can give a parent? A younger generation to an older generation. Correct. For the older generation, for the parent to not have to worry about the younger generation, the child. We call our earth Mata, correct? But we're making her worry so much. You can spin it the other way. Prithvi means daughter. But in our reference, she's our mother. We should be that child. To be independent. Here is your rad for today. I want you to make a change in your living arrangement. Not in your mind, that is your vision arrangement, but in your living arrangement, I want you to make a change so that it's more harmonious with the environment. Something that in your home that will be more aligned with less chemicals, less habitat, more plants, more natural. Okay? Everyone. And tomorrow we'll share. It'll be cool. We can brainstorm together. Announcements and then our dynamics. We're continuing to support Puvidham. Puvidham in Tamil means, or in English means, love for the earth. That is a really wonderful name. And I see Meenakshi is joining us today also. Welcome and thank you for being supportive, Meenakshi ji. Please keep supporting Puvidham. we should all be Puvidam. No, we should all love especially because our rishis have taught us to do so. All of the details are on our Niagara website. Please follow that. Shasana. To dynamics. Yesterday's dynamics was a lifestyle audit. Now, whenever you think of altar, you should think ahimsa, non-harming. That means less chemicals, more natural. And gifting. When you think of gifting, growing. Only gift that which will help a person grow. So buy copies of Bhagavad Gita and give that to 1-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 100-year-olds. Now what we're going to do is called steady melt. Steady melt. Here's what I would like for you to do. Let me speak it out first. You're going to take the plate that you already have, place that candle on that plate and light it. Then you're going to turn off the lights in the room that you're in. Okay? Everyone do that now. Plate, candle lit, turn your lights off. Those who have been sitting down for a long time, it's hard to get up, isn't it? When you're ready, you should place that plate in such a way where it's in your line of sight. You do not need to see Vivek. You only need to hear Vivek. So that plate candle that's lit now, be able to look at it naturally. Like it should be near you. And when you're ready, and most of you are, I want you to start to stare at this light. The light of your candle, simply stare at this quietly. Shift your focus to the tip of the flame. Stare at the tip of the flame of your candle. Shift lower to the base of the wick. Stare at the wick, but the bottom part of the wick. Now stare at the wax that is melting from solid to liquid. And I want you to visualize, feel that that is our environment. Stare, visualize, feel how our environment, which was once solid, is burning up and burning away to become unstable, like the wax that is liquid. and be open. Who did this to the environment? Who lit the candle? Keep staring and now listening more carefully to me. The asuras and the suras, they were the cause for the kalakuta, the halahala. Perhaps in our lifetime, that is excessive carbon dioxide. And no one could do anything without collaborating with the one who is most compassionate. Karunakara, the one whose nature is compassion and unhesitatingly shares the same. What we've done to our environment, ask for help. Ask for help with the external poison. Ask for help with the internal poison. Ask Jagadishvara for help. With your thalis and diyas, we will now ask Bhagavan Shiva, Karunakara, for help through Jagadishvara Arti. If you have an icon of Bhagavan Shiva near you, you can offer this light to Bhagavan. If not, this will be shared on our screen. Listen carefully and feel even more fully.
Om Jai Jagadish Hare Swami Jai Jagadish Hare भक्त जनों के संकट दास जनों के संकट क्षण में दूर करे ओम जय जगदीश हरे जो ध्यावे फल पावे दुख बिन से मन का स्वामी दुख बिन से मन का सुख संपत्ति घर आवे सुख संपत्ति घर आवे कष्ट मिटे तन का ओम जय जगदीश हरे मात पिता तुम मेरे शरण गहूँ मैं किसकी स्वामी शरण गहूँ मैं किसकी तुम बिन और न दूजा प्रभु बिन और न कोई आस करूँ मैं जिसकी ओम जय जगदीश हरे तुम पूर्ण परमात्मा तुम अंतर्यामी स्वामी तुम अंतर्यामी परब्रह्मा परमेश्वर परब्रह्मा परमेश्वर तुम सबके स्वामी ओम जय जगदीश हरे तुम करुणा के सागर तुम पालन करता स्वामी तुम पालन करता मैं मूरख खल कामी मैं सेवक तुम स्वामी कृपा करो भरता ओम जय जगदीश हरे तुम हो एक अगोचर सबके प्राणपति, स्वामी सबके प्राणपति। किस विध मिलूं दया मैं, किस विध मिलूं कृपा मैं, तुमको मैं कुमति। ओम जय जगदीश हरे। दीन बंधु दुख हरता, तुम रक्षक मेरे, स्वामी तुम रक्षक मेरे। अपने हाथ उठाओ, अपने चरण बढ़ाओ, द्वार पड़ा मैं तेरे। ओम जय जगदीश हरे। विषय विकार मिटाओ, पाप हरो देवा, स्वामी पाप हरो देवा। श्रद्धा भक्ति बढ़ाओ, श्रद्धा प्रेम बढ़ाओ, संतन की सेवा। ओम जय जगदीश हरे। तन मन धन सब तेरा, सब कुछ है तेरा, स्वामी सब कुछ है तेरा। तेरा तुझको अर्पण, तेरा तुझको अर्पण, क्या लागे मेरा। ओम जय जगदीश हरे। ओम जय जगदीश हरे। ओम जय जगदीश हरे।
Please offer your divine light to everyone else. Everyone else, take this light, bring it to your heads, bring it to your heart, bring it to your hands. And we will bring this divine light to our intellects and our minds and our bodies. Tuma karuna ke sagara. What a perfect sharing for what we flowed through today. Tuma palana karta. And the remaining part of this, me muraka kalakami kripa karo. For those who have less of an inclination towards bhakti or Sanskrit, today is as if Bhagavan Shiva's birthday, but we don't say happy birthday, we say Om Namah Shivaya. We will complete today's workshop and our celebration by everyone, when I share, unmuting themselves. So make sure there's no rough sounds in the back, like the TV that's on while you're listening to my discourse. And repeat after me. Okay? Everyone unmute yourselves. And we're just going to end like this so that these words are with you as you prepare to go to sleep. Repeat after me. Everyone. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya.
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 Om Namah Shivaya,
Om Namah Shivaya.
Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya.
Om Namah
Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya.
Om Namah
Om Namah
Shivaya,
Shivaya.
Om Namah
Om Namah
Shivaya.
Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya.
Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya.
Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya.
Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya.
Om
Om
Namah
Namah
Shivaya,
Shivaya. Om Namah
Om Namah Shivaya.
Shivaya.
Om Namah Shivaya, Om Shivaya.
Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya.
Om Namah Shivaya.
Om Namah
Om Namah Shivaya.